So next up, podcast listeners, we have the daily Biden dumpster fire. So we've done this before, and I think every day we could have a daily Biden dumpster fire. I didn't even have to look that hard, by the way, to find this. This is brand new. Literally came out today. So Joe Biden raises eyebrows with the claim that he used to drive an 18-wheeler truck. So in Fox News, 48-year political veteran, President Joe Biden, raised eyebrows when he claimed that he used to drive an 18-wheeler truck, a claim the White House struggled to defend. The White House is like, well, we're not going to try to, do any fact backup on this. It's probably not true. Biden was visiting a Mack truck facility in Pennsylvania. Mack trucks. It's a facility that makes them or assembles them. When he made the claim that he may have driven the massive trucks before. Actually, he made the claim that he did drive them before, which required a special kind of license. So remember, when you see these big 18-wheelers that are passing you on the highways and on the beltways throughout America, which is never very much fun when they're driving by you, especially if you have one on either side of you on a highway or a beltway and you're in the middle. It's very intimidating, and you kind of want to get out of that situation and accelerate to get out of it or brake to get out of it. Well, those guys who drive those trucks have to have special licenses and special training because the trucks are so huge. It requires a lot of skill, not just like you can hop in one and drive it. So Biden is saying, used to have one of those licenses and used to drive them. So he's visiting the Mack truck facility in Pennsylvania, and he made the claim that he drove them before. And he said, I used to drive an 18-wheeler, man, Biden said yesterday. This is a really short clip. You have to listen to it carefully, but there are these people lined up in front of a Mack truck as they're showcasing their facility in front of the president of the United States, and at least a facility where we are, assembling and or manufacturing something in the United States, which is a good thing. And Biden is visiting it. But of course, he can't help himself but embellish the fact that he drove a Mack truck. You'd think it'd be enough. He's president of the United States, but it's to embellish it even more. We have that clip, and here it is.
And anyway,
and if we
I
don't
used to drive an 18-wheeler, man.
Yeah.
Oh, I wish
yeah. That's
I
awesome.
got to.
And the media's there. The media's all over the place. Cameras everywhere, as you would expect, because that's what he wanted, because this was a press moment, so that everybody could see him at this Mack truck facility and see, wow, Joe Biden is so wonderful. We make these Mack trucks here. We assemble them here. Isn't this wonderful? So he's got everybody there watching him. All these jobs are being created. And then it's like, hey, I used to drive one of those. Once again, this is important. We have to learn how to laugh at them in their faces, because this is just funny. This is humor, right? You got this guy who's ahead of the free world, and he has to still lie. And I think this is part of, now throughout his career, by the way, podcast listeners, Joe Biden has been well known to lie and to plagiarize. And this has all been demonstrated because of the many millions of times probably by this point that he's been on TV and spoken to the media and so forth. So we have all that information. What's different now is we have an aging Biden who is kind of losing it. And I think this is kind of an example of somebody who really wasn't thinking this through the way he should. And the older that he gets, I think the less of a filter that he has. So before, he would lie probably in the right places, and the right places where he didn't think he was being watched or heard, and he could just kind of make things up. But now as an older person, and if not, an elderly person who is clearly losing his way, certainly his mind is not where it needs to be, he's willing to say just about anything, and he's losing credibility. I mean, none of those people there at this facility, I'm sure, believed that he drove a truck. None of them, right? So you immediately lose credibility, which is not something that somebody who's president of the United States with a full mind and full capacity would ever do. You would never willingly want to lose your credibility as president of the United States over something so minor. And he's doing it all of the time. all of the time with these Biden dumpster fires. And there's no doubt in my mind there's going to be a time that's going to come, and it's in the near future, by the way. Definitely, I think, before the 2022 election, although that's not what they want, the Democrats. They want them to stay just through the 2022 election. I think it's going to have to be replaced. And by replaced, that means, the vice president steps up and he steps down. And then I was just talking to Christopher Hopkins here, our producer, before we started. And it's like, well, who's going to take over as vice president? So that's how it works, right? So the president steps down. He is clearly not of the full mind that is required to do the job. The president steps down. The vice president steps up. The vice president then appoints somebody. Who does she appoint, podcast listeners? Who do you think she's going to appoint? Anybody? I think she is going to appoint, Kamala Harris is going to appoint, you ready for this? I think she's going to appoint Hillary Clinton. I really do. I really do. And then we were making a joke like, well, how long do you think it'll take if she appoints Hillary Clinton for Kamala to drive off of a bridge or, be shot somehow, or I don't know what else. What other random thing could happen to her?
Kill herself, but she's got 2 bullet wounds in the head.
That's right. She kills herself with 2 bullet wounds in the head. And by the way, podcast listeners, we're not wishing this on her at all. So I want to make this really clear. But we're saying this in jest because it seems like whoever's affiliated with the Clintons ends up dying if they're in the way of the Clintons advancing in their careers. And so I think it's still strongly possible that Kamala would choose Hillary. And then we would have 2 women in charge of the United States of America, and 2 women with very strong personalities. I got to tell you something. Kamala, just by itself, if she were to step up to be president of the United States, the Democrats are going to get skewered in the 2022 elections. They need Joe to stay in office at least through the end of November in 2022 after the midterm elections, because as hard as it is to believe, he is better than Kamala for the Democrat Party in terms of garnering votes because he's the head of the party. If she's the head of the party, I certainly don't see anyone wanting to, to be motivated to vote Democrat. Case in point, Joe Biden's, his poll numbers are sinking. So in the Wall Street Journal, it's like Joe is sinking, basically. And a lot of this is just because of his policies, right? Well, she's from California. She's going to double down on these policies because she actually believes in the crazy ass policies that they put into place in California. And she wants to bring those to the United States. And we see what's happening in California, of course, with their economy and with their environment and how they've mismanaged just about everything. And with the overpopulation that has occurred in California, largely because of illegal immigration. Not a good thing. A lot of things not so good happening in California. People can't wait to leave. Well, if she gets in charge, it'll be worse. But in the meantime, we have Joe Biden, and the Wall Street Journal is saying the country's partisan polarization has intensified every year since George W. Bush won the presidency in 2000 as a result of the hanging Chad elections. From Capitol Hill to Main Street, Republicans and Democrats don't even bother discussing anything of political substance. What's the point if 90% of the opposition is against whatever you've got? That leaves independence as the only thing that moves elections. That's true, by the way. And the bad news for Mr. Biden and his party's immovable 90%ers is the independents are now in motion. In mid-June, granted it's the end of July, but in mid-June, Mr. Biden's approval rating in the Gallup poll was a decent 56%. It's now, today, in the end of July, 50%. Among independents, he's at 48%, down 7 points. If you were in a plane that lost altitude that fast, you'd be white knuckling both armrests. So as you can see, the Biden administration is in a free fall, a complete free fall in the polls. And in the meantime, he's having these dumpster fires where he can't even talk. He can't even communicate. he isn't making sense. He can't really answer a question. He pulls out the little note cards that he has in his pocket, and they have like the little sentences he's supposed to read to answer questions. In some cases, it tells him who's he supposed to call on. You know, like there are a bunch of reporters, and he can't even remember which reporters are friendly, so he has to have it written down for him and call those reporters. It's gotten that bad. So independents, I think, don't like his policies. I don't think independents are moving away from Biden because he's losing his mind. I think they're moving away from him because they don't like his policies. With Kamala Harris, I think if she takes over, they're going to not like anything about her. They're not going to like her policies. They're not going to like her general attitude. They're not going to like the fact that they believe that she's not qualified. And I want to explain that, podcast listeners, so I don't get in trouble. I don't think she's qualified because I don't think she's ever been challenged in any election or in any debate. I don't think she's been challenged in anything that she's done. I think everything has pretty much been handed to this woman. And as president of the United States, the presidents that are the best are the ones that have been challenged along the way. They've had many elections. They've persevered. They've been challenged by both sides. They've had primaries and they've had general elections. And they've really, at the end of the day, done a great job and persevered. Not Kamala Harris. She's used to everybody agreeing with what she says. Everybody around her always agrees with her. That's California. You don't really need to listen to the opposition in California because the opposition is so small that they're inconsequential when it comes to statewide elections. Now, granted, that might be changing a little bit with Gavin Newsom because he's completely messed up the economy. But with Kamala, she's now vice president of the United States, and all through her career, she hasn't had that possibility of ever being challenged. So if she is elevated to president of the United States, I see independents moving another 20 points. And by moving, it means moving away from Kamala and the Democrats and moving toward the Republicans. There will be a bloodbath in November. And I know what you're thinking, podcast listeners. You're like, well, that's good because, bloodbath and we take over the House, we took over the Senate. You know what? I agree with you. Okay, that would be good because then we would have checks and balances in place with the legislature versus the executive branch. But I'm actually talking about the state legislatures. Because when Obama was in office, the Republican Party gained 1,000 seats in state legislatures across the country. 1,000. In fact, that's when I got elected. I was one of those 1,000. And now, if Kamala takes over, we're going to gain another 1,000 seats, I am convinced, in state legislatures over the remaining 2 years of her term. I am absolutely convinced. And that will be game-changing to the country. Game-changing. And everybody knows that this is a possibility, but the Democrats are the one that chose her to be the vice president of the United States. They chose her. She was the chosen one to be his nominee. Did they not think that at some point the guy was too old and was going to maybe lose it and have to be replaced? And did they not realize that she was the person in our Constitution who's going to take over? I mean, have you watched her in an interview? Have you actually watched her in an interview and observed how nasty she gets when she's asked questions with which she doesn't know the answer, or questions that challenge her credibility because she said one thing last year and another thing this year? She can't deal with it. She can't. And the American people don't like that. They don't like politicians who aren't at least jovial and about, mistakes they've made. And I guess the term is self-deprecating. They don't like that. They're not into it. They don't think that that's a good thing at all. So that is the Biden dumpster fire, and Kamala Harris is going to take over, at least at some point.